Welcome everyone. In today's gear review video, we're going to be looking at how a small EDC pouch like this, that I've carried for a couple years now, compares with that. At a glance, the BEEFY pocket organizer features a lot of the same things that the mini version does in terms of you have a screen pocket here that you can slide things into. You have hook and loop there if you want to do morale patches or anything like that. And it features some nice heavy-duty YKK zips with lanyard ties. Makes them very easy to use, very easy to grab, very smooth. I won't do a super in-depth walkthrough of everything that's in here. I mainly just have this loaded out to a degree so that you can appreciate the types of setup that you could put in here. And for your reference, here's a kind of a list of specifications that come straight from Maxpedition. I'll show them on screen here just so that you have them to go along with everything we're going to discuss. One of the things I really like about this, in contrast to the smaller micro, is that you have staggered directions for the elastic bands. I actually think that's handy because in this one, sometimes you have to consider like what you're planning to put in this when you go to close it. It's part of the reason I have this little tape measure here, because as it closes, it's going to fill in this blank spot. If I tried to put it on the end, it can collide with some of the stuff you have over here, and that becomes more of a challenge as you're trying to load it out. What I like about them crisscrossing is that's less of a thing. Also, this is deeper, so this stuff that's up on here kind of has its own space in here, and certain things that clip that when you carry this upright are going to make sense to be up and down are nice to carry there. And then there's other things like here. I've got these batteries underneath here, sort of acting as a seat belt, holding it in. I've got a charger and some cord there. That's kind of nice that it's staggered this way, because then when it's upright, this stuff is stopped by the stitching and stopped by the floor here. That's actually really handy, and it's not something you would get if it was this way, both directions. Now you also do have a zipper area that you can keep some things, as long as they're fairly flat. That would be the only limitation I could see for this zip pouch, is if what you're putting in here is too thick or too lumpy, it creates issues for the kind of stuff that you could put under these bands. So just make sure that it's fairly flat. And same deal here. You have a pocket underneath that stuff. You probably have a little bit more leeway on this side of what could stick up just because of the nature of how this elastic band is working. I've got some 220 sandpaper in a little Ziploc here just to keep it dry. That's very handy. This is kind of for demonstration purposes. I usually have these in a backpack or a sling bag anyway, so I don't really need them in here. But I do always like to carry around some ability to sharpen knives, and this pack is big enough to actually put my guided field sharpener in there, and it fits really nicely. The only other consideration I think I would pass along to folks is the extra room that you have in this is sort of a double-edged sword. Like on one hand, it's nice that you can put so much stuff in here, but on the other hand, you kind of need to load it out hard because, as you can see here, I don't have stuff that takes up the full depth of this, and so if I zipped it shut, I might be in a scenario where if I put this in a backpack and it was like jingling around and shaking a bit and going different directions, when I go to open it again, some stuff has moved. This actually stayed in place pretty well, and I'm excited about that. But you might have scenarios where if some of this stuff could collide with each other or could scratch each other, that could be a concern. You'd probably want to pack this a little bit more tightly. Although I figure in a pinch, you could just fold up a bandana and lay it on there and kind of act as padding there if you didn't know what else to do with it. And the only other consideration maybe is weight. So if this is just going to be something single-handedly that you bring with you and you throw in a car, or you bring outside to do some work, or maybe you bring it camping and you carry it by the grab handle, cool. But if you're going to throw it in a backpack, then just be conscious of how much weight you're going to add in this, because that can jump up pretty quickly once you start loading this stuff out. That's been my experience, and a couple of times when I've played with bags like this, I've been sort of surprised when I loaded out with what seemed like a good idea. Next thing I know, it's got some heft to it. It's part of the reason, in the footage I'll show you here in a minute of this when it's more fully loaded out, I keep it relatively minimal because I want this one to be fairly slim and fairly light. This is slim enough that I can throw it in a sling bag, which is really helpful, and it just adds just enough functionality to stuff I'm already bringing with me without introducing a whole lot of extras that I may or may not always need. Alright, while I won't spend a ton of time talking through this one because it's not the star of the show, I wanted to create some context because I've been using this pouch for years. I've tried a bunch of different loadouts with it, just experimenting, and this is the one that's been the most useful to me. The idea behind this, I've found, is I usually have a multi-tool like the Surge here or the Arc or something in my pocket most days, and so this is a good complement to it because I've got like the bit extender, I've got a separate bit ratchet bit, and then I've got the Leatherman bits that I can add to this, as well as a kind of a custom selection of regular bits. Got a few different things. This will adapt it to take actual sockets, a couple of the common Torx sizes that I end up using a lot. So just having that in there pairs really well with that and extends what I can do with it. Behind this, I've got the extra saws that you can put in the Surge. Since I carry the Surge a lot, then that's really useful to tuck that in there. And that way it's not something that has to take up a lot of room in my holster for the belt, in case I use that for the Surge. I found that when I have the Leatherman bits and that at the same time, it could be a bit much. So anyway, everything with this in terms of build quality materials is pretty much in line with what you would expect with all things Maxpedition. It's extremely well stitched. The material here is very heavy duty. This feels very durable. I would have no hesitation whatsoever about this being something you throw in a backpack and it's sliding up against other materials on a regular basis. That doesn't worry me one bit with that. And I like the ability that if you really wanted to, you could mount this to a backpack that has MOLLE and that kind of setup. To me, this would be a little big to put on the sides, but I might put it on, say, the front of a bag. Especially maybe if I was going for a hike and I packed this full of stuff for camping and backpacking, that might be just a really useful add-on type of thing. But I think it gives you a lot of options on what you can do with it because of, as you can see here, you've got the larger slots on the bottom and then more slender slots on the front of those, and you've got the same type of setup going this way. And I'm still kind of playing around with this setup. As I've said in other videos, I've had this one for years. I've tried all kinds of configurations and I found what works really well for me with this size, and it fits really easily into a sling bag kind of setup. Obviously that's a little different for something this big, but I think as an EDC bag or a tool bag or something like that, this really makes a lot of sense. You could fit a lot of very practical items like this in here that's still way smaller than carrying some sort of dedicated tool bag. This is really easy as a modular kind of setup. You could bring this on its own, you could throw it in a backpack, you could throw it in the back of a car, wherever is going to be convenient for you. And if you had some kind of consistent loadout that is tools or gadgets that you need on a regular basis, or maybe it's part of your go bag setup, and you set it up very deliberately toward, if I were in a get home scenario, what's a very compact set of things that would make my life a lot easier. This kind of size gives you that kind of consideration that I don't know that you can always do the same with this size of a pouch, which is why I've always gravitated toward having this be sort of a, if I'm carrying a multi-tool in my pocket and I might have a flashlight in my pocket, what's stuff that builds off of that pocket setup that gives what I'm already carrying more functionality without introducing a whole lot of new big things that I may or may not use. So this is kind of a cool way to separate the use case for me with both of these. You could have a bag like this set up specifically for certain stuff, for certain needs go in here, and then this is maybe a first aid kit, and then you have another one that is electronics or things like that. That's really neat and something I would like to experiment a bit more with myself on my bag setup. Curious what you guys think, what kinds of stuff you have loaded out in maybe bags you've had this size, or if you've had smaller or larger. What do you make of this kind of a setup, and where do you see that maybe fitting into how you carry your things every day? I would love to hear from you on that. I love talking that kind of stuff with other people for perspectives and just to get other people's ideas. I think that's all I have for today to talk about with this bag, but as I continue using it, I'll post more content, and definitely ask me questions if you think of them, if it's something I've not covered here, and I will do my best to answer it, and maybe it'll inspire a future video. So I thank you guys for watching me, and I'll help you join me in the next one.